Okay, so today I'm going to explain how the powers that shouldn't be artificially create booms and busts. So the first thing to kind of understand here is that these aren't naturally, this cycle of boom and bust isn't a naturally occurring thing. It's something that's artificially created. So I'll explain the process by which they do that. And then the second thing that I'm going to explain is why do they do it? What do they gain from creating these cycles of boom and bust? So the first thing to understand is just what a boom is. So very, very quickly and simply, an economic boom, it's a period of time where spending is high across the economy and it's growing. Profits, firms are making good profits. Employment levels are high and growing. Businesses are being formed. And have I missed anything out? No, I haven't really. Rising asset prices, yeah. So house prices going up, share prices going up. Those are your basic characteristics of a boom. And a bust, in common parlance, is just the opposite of all of these things. So it's a period of time where spending's falling, firms are making losses, employment's falling, unemployment's rising, businesses are going bust, and you've got falling asset prices. Now, the next thing to kind of we'll talk about is what creates this cycle of boom and bust. So most people that have been studying economics, they have no idea about this whatsoever because they've been indoctrinated into just one side of the story. And that side of the story is Keynesianism. And I'm not going to repeat their kind of bogus explanations because the internet and economics textbooks are just littered with them. So what I'm going to do instead is to explain to you what really causes the cycle of boom and bust. So let's start off with what causes booms. So a boom is really it's mislabeled. What booms are, it's an expansion of credit. And credit really is just a fancy term for debt. So how does this take place? Well, basically, it's commercial banks that make the loans. Most money that's in circulation is credit money and it's lent into existence by banks. So for that to happen, what's needed is that the central banks, or banks like the Bank of England, they have to set low interest rates. So they set low interest rates. Okay, so if we take that, the low interest rates, that then sets off a sequence of events. Well, it basically incentivizes borrowing and kind of speculation, people buying assets with borrowed money. So what then happens then is that you get an increase in consumption. People start spending money. So what happens next is that firms sell more stuff. So sales go up. That then leads to an increase in output. Firms start producing more. And then also people need to be employed to produce that stuff. So you get an increase in employment. So there's jobs created in the boom. Profits go up. The speculation, if we take that one, that also causes asset prices to go up. So you get property booms. Asset prices go up, share prices go up. That's basically the boom. The boom is an expansion of credit, and it's kick-started by the central banks. They're the ones that throw petrol onto this fire by setting interest rates too low for too long. That incentivizes households to borrow and spend and borrow and speculate. The speculation pushes up asset prices. The borrowing to finance consumption creates a boom in the economy. New firms are set up. The firms that are already there sell more, make more profit. There's lots of jobs on offer. Most firms are making good profits. So that's the boom. Okay, so all good things come to an end. So during this credit expansion, people are borrowing more. So household debt goes up. Yeah. Now, people's wages, they might be going up a little bit too, but nowhere near as high as debts are going up. So what you've got here then is that the debt to household income ratio, could multiply that by 100, make it into a percentage. This percentage starts to rise. That puts pressure on households because when you have debt, you also have to pay interest on credit cards, on mortgages. And again, maybe your wages are going up a little bit, but if it's a big boom, it's out of control like it has been for like 30 years. It's been a very, very long credit expansion, this one. What happens is that interest takes up a bigger and bigger proportion of household income. So basically, the credit expansion ends when households are struggling to finance their consumption because most of the income that they're earning is going out of the door in interest payments. So what begins to happen then is that you get defaults. And a default is a situation where a borrower can't pay the interest on their debts, or they can't even repay the principal of what they borrowed in the first place to the bank or the building society that lent them the money. So what then happens is that you end up with a financial crisis because the defaults cause a banking crisis. So banks make losses. Let's show you this. Banks make losses on bad debts that are unrecoverable. So at this point, you've got the new phase in the economic cycle beginning, which is the credit contraction. And that's the bust, basically. So all of a sudden, basically spending in the economy starts to fall. I'll just turn the camera on for a minute. Spending in the economy starts to fall. There's several reasons for this. First of all, people have got massive debts. They're struggling with the ones that they've got already. So there's no way that they can keep on borrowing to maintain consumption levels. So rather than spending what they earn plus what they can borrow, they're now down to just spending what they earn. Or maybe not even that. Maybe they're realizing, wow, I need to start paying off some of this debt that I've got because I'm being killed by the interest that I've got to pay on it. So, and then there might be other people who were reliant on bank credit from institutions that have either got burnt completely, that don't exist, that have gone bust, banks that have gone bust, or maybe banks, more likely, banks that have reassessed their appetite to risk, and rather than lending very recklessly to households, they've decided now to only lend to people that have got super duper A1 credit scores, and then even to them maybe lend less than they would have done. So basically what you've got then is a sudden reduction in the availability of credit, and that leads to falling levels of consumption. The falling levels of consumption then cause firms to lose sales. They make redundancies. Firms go bust, and you have the bust, and the bust is almost like an inevitable consequence of the boom that preceded it. The credit contraction only happened because of the credit expansion that occurred before the bust occurred. So you then got another phenomenon that's called malinvestment. So when interest rates were low, firms used that borrowed money quite recklessly just because it was quite cheap. And what happened as a consequence of that was that all sorts of stupid investments took place in projects that weren't really needed. So scarce resources were used in a wasteful way. And that also exacerbates the problems that the economy stops working properly because a lot of resources were wasted in harebrained schemes. Quite a lot of them were speculative schemes that were only profitable because of these artificially low interest rates that were set by the central banks. So these malinvestments, it's almost like, imagine you've got a bunch of people bathing in the sea. Some of them have got swimming trunks on, some of them are naked, right? It's only when the tide goes out that you can actually see who's got a swimming trunks on and who hasn't. And this is basically what happens in the credit contraction period. The tide goes out, and everyone can then see the malinvestments that were made during the credit expansion when interest rates were kept too low for too long by the central banks. Right. So in summary, then, what I'm saying so far is that this cycle of boom and bust. Do not believe anybody who tries to tell you that this is an act of God, that this is just the natural way of things. It's not. The cycle of boom and bust is something that is entirely man-made, and it's made by the powers that shouldn't be, the people that control the central banks. It's them that set interest rates too low for too long, and it's their mates in the commercial banking system that basically lend the money to the plebs. So what I'm going to do now is to explain, like, why did they go to the trouble of creating these cycles of boom and bust? It could be summed up by these two words, really. Debt slavery. So what most people think, even people that have been taught A-level and even degree level economics, is that they're told that something that's factually incorrect. They're told that commercial banks make loans out of deposits put in the bank by savers. This is completely untrue. The truth of the matter is that commercial banks don't need savings to make loans. What they do is that they create credit money by lending that money into existence. So if somebody, for example, me, if I sign a loan agreement, that loan agreement acts as collateral, and the bank is then allowed to create digital money. They just type it in and credit my account. And that's okay because they've got the loan agreement that I signed, which acts as collateral. So basically, during the credit expansion, you've basically got debts going up. So you can see this maybe yourself, maybe in your own household. If you take your mortgage, you take your credit card, you take your car loan money, maybe half of your household income is going on interest payments. So what they've managed to convince you is that debt is wealth, and you can see all of this from their TV programs. The clue is in the name. You've been programmed by programs like Location, 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 Homes Under the Hammer, and all of these other what I used to call property porn shows, that you don't have to bother working for a living. All you should do is go down to the bank, borrow as much money as possible, and go and speculate with it by buying property. Because everybody knows that house prices always go up. And what I would say to that is, house prices do only go up, but they only go up during a credit expansion, which is basically what we've had for the last 30 or 40 years. So there'll be people, I know people who've made a lot of money from that credit expansion phase, and they will say, well, house prices do only go up. And I would say, well, they don't know their economic history. And what's happened is just a very, very unusual situation where we've had a credit expansion for over 30 years. Now, the other thing as well is that if you can debt people up, as I say, you can harvest most of their income from them in the form of interest payments. And this is the kind of the trick that the powers that shouldn't be have played on the peasants, yeah, which is, hey sheeple, get into as much debt as possible, and then what we'll do is we'll be able to like harvest most of your income, most of your wages. We'll take it from you, we'll steal it from you, and you will pay it to us in interest. And this is basically the main game that they play during the credit expansion. They want you to get into as much debt as possible. Another one that's obviously very popular one that Blair brought in was student loans. And then you have people like Martin Lewis. His role is to convince you, the sheep, that it's actually a good idea to borrow 60 grand to do a psychology degree. So what happens then in the credit contraction? How do they make money from you there? Well, basically, how much is a house worth? It's worth how much somebody's able to pay, yeah? So how much is a house worth? It's worth how much somebody's prepared to pay. How much they're prepared to pay is, well, people buy houses with a mortgage, isn't it? So how much people are prepared to pay is a function of how much they're able to borrow. So during a credit contraction, you haven't seen one during your lifetime, but you're about to see one. When credit becomes in short supply, people can't borrow as much, so therefore they can't pay as much. So therefore, house prices fall, because people can only sell a house for what somebody's able to pay for it. And as I say, most houses are bought with mortgages. So if people can only borrow, say, 60 grand, well, basically the house will be sold for 60 grand plus what somebody else has got as cash savings. So how did they profit from this credit contraction then? Well, do you remember the Channel 4, location, location, location? Well, during the credit contraction that's coming, it's going to be repossession, repossession, repossession. So they will then be able to buy up distressed assets that are worth pennies on the pound. In Japan, they had a credit contraction in the 1990s, and house prices in Tokyo fell by 90%. So this then fits in with Klaus Schwab, doesn't it? You will own nothing and you will be happy. So the trick that they'll play on people is they'll have got them to hand over half of their family income in interest payments, and then at the end of it, you're still not going to own the stuff because they're going to repossess you, people that have mortgages. I guess the other thing is for people that have paid off the mortgage, they might then say, well, no, you've got to take out a new mortgage to fit some new air source heating or to make your house environmentally compliant. And basically, they'll repossess you that way, or maybe by pushing up council tax. But basically, this is what happens. This is the cycle of boom and bust. It's not organic. It's not natural. It's something that's unnatural, that's man-made, and it's fundamentally there's two people that are responsible. The first one is the commercial banks that set interest rates too low for too long. That encourages people to borrow, and it's the private banks, like NatWest, Lloyds. It's them that actually lend the money. Most of the money that's in circulation is credit money, and it's lent into existence. So I hope I've managed to sort of teach you about what the cycle of boom and bust really is, and it's a cycle of credit expansion. That's the boom. And the credit contraction is the bust, yeah? So the boom gets started with an expansion of credit. Central banks set to interest rates too low. Are you starting to get it? Haha. Right, so that's all I want to say today, so God bless.